Hello, dear viewer, and welcome to the beginning series about Roblox Studio. In this series, I'll mainly focus on scripting, but this video will cover the absolute basics of how to work with Roblox Studio. When you launch the program for the first time, you should see something like this. To briefly explain what they do, if you want to create a project from scratch, you can choose either of the base plates, but you also have the option to jumpstart your project with any of the prefabs listed in the menu. For the games menu, these list what games you have made, published, and it also shows what group games you've been invited to. If this is your first time launching the program, welcome to Roblox Studio. By the end of this tutorial, you will be able to build your own obby. This is what you should see if this is your first time. For now, I want you to close every single tab you see on your screen. We'll get back to them later. Now, what you're left with is the workspace. What is the workspace? This is where you would spend majority of your time if you are building, animating, or making particles. Moving on the top, you should see the Home tab. In the Home tab, there are several buttons you can click. We'll focus on the main ones in this tutorial. The grand four you will use a lot are Select, Move, Scale, and Rotate. To demonstrate their functionality, we'll have to click the Part button on the right. Doing that will cause a part to spawn inside the workspace. Now, you can use the Select option and click on the part to select it. If you press the Scale button while having a part selected, you will see 4 dots that represent the directions. Clicking and pulling any of these will cause the part to scale in that direction. The same goes for Rotate and Move buttons. Moving on to the next tab, which is called Model. As you can see, in the Model tab, there are a whole lot more buttons to click. As I said before, this tutorial focuses on generally used tools. You've probably noticed that there are familiar buttons from the previous tab. That's because the Home tab contains the most essential things in it. The sections you'll use the most are Solid Modeling, Parts, and Tools. You already know what tools do. One thing I forgot to explain was Transform. So Transform is move, scale, and rotate mashed into a single thing. You can do everything that these three include in themselves. For example, I can scale it this way. I can even scale it like this. You can rotate them in every direction, and you have the move up and down. One thing I want to note is if you want to move them sideways, you have to drag them around. There are no arrows on the sides to move the part. Next section is Parts. The Parts section features a few things. A button to create a part. We did that previously. Material Manager. This is for advanced materials. You can forget about it. Next one is Color. Pretty self-explanatory, but for those who don't understand it, I'll still explain. It will apply a color to the currently selected part. We'll talk about locking and anchoring a bit later. Now, the so-called scary part is up for the job. Solid Modeling. There are only 3 buttons in this section, first one being Union. I'll talk about it in a quick second. Next one is Negate. If you want to, let's say, cut a hole inside a part or remove some chunk of it, then you would negate a second part, which you could then use to do what you wanted. With that established, here's how it looks like. Negating a part will cause it to slightly turn red and transparent, which indicates that it's negated. Next, you want to select a different part, which you can do by pressing left click while holding Control. After that, you guessed it, we press the Union button I previously mentioned. This will cause the parts to merge together. Since we've negated one of them, upon merging, it deleted a chunk out of the other one. Here's an example on two normal parts. The separate option reverses the union. The Test tab was waiting for its debut. It's pretty small compared to the previous ones. If you click the arrow under the play button, it will show all the possible options. To briefly explain, play will cause the game to spawn your character in a randomly selected spawn, in case there are multiple. Play here causes to spawn the character at your camera's position. Note that if your character dies, it will spawn it just like the normal play option does. Last one is Run. This one does not spawn a character upon clicking. Instead, you can observe the world as a camera. This also means that unlike just flying around the workspace, since this one is a simulation of the real game without the character, physics will be calculated and all the scripts you've made will work. Speaking about anchoring things, this property allows us to anchor a part and let it stay in the air. It is located on the bottom right of the color button. After that, we have clients and service. This allows you to run a local server on your computer with up to 8 copies of yourself. I do not recommend using this if you have a low-end PC. So, the View tab. This is where you can open those tabs you've closed at the start of the video. Congrats! If you click the Explorer tab, you'll see a new menu appear on your screen. What it does is it lets you move parts to other places, for example, replicated storage. From there, you can clone it and use it for later. This is very useful for scripting, but for the purpose of our video, let's say you want to add a script to a part to do some functionality for you. For example, move back and forth for an obby. You would do this by first creating a part, and then you would right click, and press Insert Object. In here, you would see all this huge list of things. But what you want is either see this frequently used tab, or you can manually type in script and then click it. This will parent the script to the part you've selected. Now, parenting is it is the process of determining the hierarchical parent of an instance. So this means if I currently parent this part to replicated storage, you will see that it's no longer here, but if I click it in replicated storage, it's still existing in the game, but I just don't see it, and I cannot interact with it. So physics is not calculated for those parts who are not in Workspace. I'm just going to clarify that. And let's say, for the purpose of parenting, right? For the purpose of building. The purpose of parenting in building is actually if you want to create, let's say, multiple parts, right? And you construct some house or whatever you really want. And so then you see that your workspace is actually, well, a little bit messed up. So you have two solutions. You can hold Shift and click to the top of on the first part, which will select all of the things that are in between the first selected instance and the last selected instance. So and then you want to go to the Model tab, and you have this magic button, Group as Model. Now, if you press it, it will group it as a model, and you can move it around. You can actually even scale those, rotate, and obviously use transform. The other way you can do this is, it is a little bit different. This is just for organization. So you selected all of these different parts, and then you just want your workspace to be just cleaner. You don't want to move them around or anything. You can just parent all of these to this part, and then if you close this arrow, you only have one part which you have to worry about. And then if you want to access those, if I select this part, right, you can see that it selects every single part. That's the child of this. So then you can press the arrow and you can access each individual part in here. So with parenting and Explore established, you can move on back into the View tab, click Properties, and you will see this magical menu appear. So Properties. Let's say you wanted to change the transparency of a part, or you wanted to change some very specific ping. You go and select the part, and as you can see, the properties actually change. So properties depend on which instant type you selected. I'll show this in a little bit later in the video, but for now you just want to know that depending on which instant type you're messing around with, there's going to be different properties to it. So to change transparency of a part, you can just type here a number from 0 to 1, 1 being completely transparent and 0 being fully visible. There are also materials, which you can select any of them, and those are basically textures. Those textures are given by Roblox, so you just want to note that. You can change your material to anything, and then you can go to either brick color or color, doesn't quite matter because this is the color UI and this is brick color, which is a little bit easier to understand, in my opinion at least. And so then you can pick a color when you've decided this is the color you want. You can press left click on it and it will apply it. Same goes for here. You select a color, let's go with red, bright red, and then we click OK and it applies it. So early in the video I talked about locking and anchoring. So this is locking. If you lock a part, let me bring it into Workspace to make it easier. I cannot select it in any single way. I cannot click it, I cannot select it like this. The only way I can select it is by finding it in the Explorer and physically clicking it. One note is that characters, your character, is actually locked from the start. You can obviously disable this feature with some coding, or you can physically change it in your game. Another hotkey which would be useful to remember is Shift P. This allows you to free roam your camera, and you can hold right click to turn around. It has pretty weird movement, but it works in game. But one thing I gotta note is that you have to be the developer of the game in order for this to work. You cannot use this feature if you're a normal player or you don't have the hammer near your name. Since I'm in Studio, it won't show the hammer. So that's just one thing you gotta know. Then another thing is you can click pause to pause everything. I am not sure if you can actually rotate your camera like this, but it will stop the simulation of the game. If you press resume, it's gonna, well, resume. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So getting back to properties, we also have things like can collide, can touch, anchored, and massless. So I won't be explaining massless or can touch. Those are mostly coding, and this is physics, so I don't think this tutorial requires it. But you already seen anchored earlier in the video, this thing, and can collide. So I have to run another test because I cannot show it without it. So if I currently try to get on top of the part, I will stand on it, which is, wow, okay, it works. But if I go get this part and I go and set can collide to false, this is another coding feature, you don't want to worry about it. And I try to step on it, it is fully, if I unanchor it, wait, I gotta do it on the server. If I unanchor it on the server, it's going to fall. But since it has can collide off, it fell through the map because it didn't collide with the base plate. So that's one thing you gotta know. That's probably it with properties, I think. So next thing is Toolbox. Toolbox is this free way of getting anything you really want. So you can search here for basically anything. I'm gonna search for an NPC for demonstration. So I can drag this out and it will put it into Workspace, and then if I unhold my left click, it will just let it be. So the inventory tab, this is what you've uploaded or bought from the Roblox Studio marketplace. It is mostly useful if you're later on gonna continue with your career and you're going to follow some other tutorial and they're gonna include a link to a model and you download that model. You're gonna search it in the toolbox. So let's say enter it, and you can actually see that if I really want, I can go drag it out, and this is one of the models I have. So this is recent, this is just what you used recently. I don't think it really matters. Now, next thing is Asset Manager. Asset Manager requires you to publish your game first. So let's do that. We're gonna publish it as tutorial video. Team Create, I'm probably gonna explain what Team Create is in the next video and how to actually use it. So you want to stay tuned for that. You click save. All cool. And now, since we've published the game, it's not public. Like, I want to mention that it's not public. If you want to make it public, you gotta change it. So if you want to make the game public, you want to go into File, Game Settings, and then you would go into Permission, and here you would click Public. You can also change the game to be playable by your friends by just changing it to friends, clicking save. In here, in the Asset Manager, let's get back to the topic, you can upload your meshes from, let's say, Blender, if you're a modeler. You can upload audio in, I don't know why would you even upload audio like that, but it's your call. So this is probably it. You also have Places, which is useful for teleport service and only teleport service really, which is another coding thing. So we won't focus on that. Getting back is you have the command bar, which you can just type in code in here while in game and it will run it. It's just really that. You have the output, which displays all the errors that your code runs into, maybe some errors that Roblox runs into, all the prints, which I'm going to explain in a scripting tutorial, what a print is. So it will just display all the messages you have incoming from the game. Then, the last thing, actually before I go into that, I want to mention parenting properties. So as you can see, the noob is every single part of his, right? Body colors, humanoid, and every single body part of his is parented to the nub model. Because of this, I can actually drag him around as a single thing, which is just easier, and it keeps things organized. But for the purpose of humanoids, you actually want to make the model, because otherwise they won't work. So that's just one thing you want to know. Now, let's select humanoid. Humanoid will not appear in the workspace, whatever you do, because it is not a part or anything physical. It's just that. That's why you want to use the Explorer, because there's no way to access it without one. Now if you go into the properties, as you can see, there is no position, there is no size, there is no color for this. It has completely different properties. For example, you have something like max health, their walk speed, their jump power, and those are all properties of a character. So I'm gonna delete this little guy and delete all of this. So next thing, and the last thing actually, is plugins. So the plugins tab contains all of the plugins you've ever downloaded. You can go and manage your plugins, see what you want to keep in this UI. So if I really want to, I can find Rig Edit Light, for example, disable it, and it will disappear. If I re-enable it, you'll see that it'll appear here. So that's one thing. Some plugins don't actually appear here. For example, you have Particle Emitter by OZPig. For this, you have to select a particle for the plugin to function. It will not appear over here. To download plugins, you have to go onto the Roblox Studio Marketplace again, and in there you can search for a plugin that you want. I just want you to be careful that there are some sketchy plugins, so you probably want to trust maybe some YouTube videos, or maybe you have a friend that uses a plugin. You want to trust those sources. So just mindlessly searching for a plugin might get you in trouble. So now that we are done with the tutorial part of the video, we can actually start making an obby. So with the power of knowledge and properties, you can finally make your own obby. You can start by creating a part. I won't use plugins because that's basically cheating. And you place that part whatever you want, and then you delete everything you had. So this is your base. You can scale it, and then you insert a spawn location. You click on it, and there you can see it's pretty large, so you can scale it down. Then if you want players to not really like collide with it, and you don't want players to see it, you can set this transparency to 1, can collide to false, and then go here and then delete the decal. So now you have an invisible spawn which players cannot actually see through. Wait, I said the wrong thing. Okay. Anyways, now from there you can spawn in a part, scale it. So this is your first platform. I'm gonna make it less distance. And now you can clone the part by holding Control and then pressing D, which is going to make the clone at the exact position. So now I'll move this and I'll have, I don't know, I'll scale it like this, and then I'll duplicate it again, and I'll have 3 paths. So I'll have this, this, and this. So this is going to be red, this is going to be blue, and this is going to be green. And now I want to have only one right path, which is going to be the blue one. And I set the can collide to false. So now, if I step on any of these, I'm going to fall into the void and die. Now I can repeat the process by selecting all of these, cloning, moving them, choosing those 2 as can collide true, maybe making this one can collide false, and this one also can collide false. And now, so it's blue, then red, and then you can easily continue the cycle, but I'm just going to end it here. So you also want to make sure that everything is anchored, because otherwise it's just going to fall into the void. So you can just select everything, go into the home or the menu tab, and click anchor. Now, they won't fall into the void, which is nice. So if I press play, so as you can see, I cannot touch the spawn because and it's invisible because we set the properties of it like that. And I can jump. So if I touch the green one, I fall into the void. And if I touch the blue one, I can easily walk on it, and then I can go onto the red one, and there you go. Now, I know many of you will be asking, how do I change this dull background? You can do that by either making your own skybox, which is tough work. The easiest solution is going into the Toolbox and just searching for a skybox. In here, you can just, I don't know, let's go with Magical Skybox. You click it and then it applies it. Simple as that. You can always just go and delete it to return everything back. But there you go. You changed the skybox. Good job. I won't explain lighting because it is probably a video by itself. It is decently complicated with all its features like bloom, depth of field, and sun rays, to just the properties. They deserve their own time. So I'm probably gonna end here. If you liked the video, then I want to ask you to like the video, subscribe, and if you have any suggestions or you want to say something, you can comment down below and I'm gonna read all of them. See ya.